Love it or hate it, it's Color of the Year season, and Benjamin Moore just released their 2022 Color of the Year, but they also came out with 13 other colors that make up their color palette for next year, so let's talk about them. Welcome back to the paint, people. It seems like you enjoy painting and decorating as much as I do if you're watching this video, and if that's the case, then make sure to show your support with a bop of the old like button. And let's get this video started. The Benjamin Moore 2022 Color Trends palette provides us with a cohesive set of colors that fit the mold of Benjamin Moore's vision of the future of design, if that makes sense. The cornerstone of it all is the Color of the Year October Mist, and not only do I have an October Mist towel, I got an October Mist shirt as well. Kinda. We did a fun little announcement video earlier that you can check out afterwards. I'll leave it at the end of the video. But like a lot of companies, Benjamin Moore sees green as being a pretty significant color to use moving forward. And this is a pretty big departure from what we've seen in the past in the grand scheme of things. If you're familiar with design, particularly interior design, you maybe have an idea of those neutral colors that have been circulating for over a decade now, those more minimalist art gallery aesthetics that have been extremely popular for better or worse. But like a lot of things, there tends to be a pretty clear cycle that pop culture tends to go through. And we can even see that with the number of new musicians adopting a neo-80s sound like The Weeknd. Proud Canadian. Kind of a what's old is new again type of thing. And I noticed some people in the comment section that were saying they used a green like October Mist 20 years ago. But what's cool about this particular selection for 2022 is not necessarily the color itself, but how it's being talked about and framed as a baseline color for some more dynamic color hues. Starting with Wildflower. And this is the color that immediately stood out to me when I watched the promotional video by Benjamin Moore. It's sort of a dusty, pinky coral clay color that has an LRV of 23.23. Yet its vibrance and saturation keeps it feeling uplifting. And this is one of those quintessential colors that will really pop against October Mist as a backdrop. It's an extremely complementary relationship that the colors have, but that was the intention behind them. It's right in the name, Wildflower. That's the accent color, or the flower petals, while October Mist is the stem. You could argue another flowery color, that's hard to say, is Pale Moon, the second color. This is a very soft yellow with an LRV right around 78. This would be more of a subtle accent color because of its pretty high light reflectance value. Some might call it an off-white because it's kind of close to that 80 mark, although because of its strong amount of yellow, it will give you a pretty buttery, creamy feel. So don't use it in place of white. It's definitely more of an off-white kind of yellowy color, but I like it. It's delightful. The third color we're talking about is called Hint of Violet, and another potential flower petal soft accent color, although this one is probably the closest thing to gray you'll see in this entire color palette. Again, it's in the name. It's just a hint of violet rather than a heavy-handed dose of purple. Using this is a wonderful way to subtly introduce purple into a color scheme, which is another one of those pseudo-complementary pairings for green. And what we have a lot of in the Benjamin Moore palette is green. There's a ton of it. Not just the color of the year, we also have Morning Dew, Smoky Green, Fernwood Green, High Park, and even Gloucester Sage. Each one brings something a little bit different to the table, but they're all green. Starting with Morning Dew, which is through and through an absolute green-age color. It's a beautiful combination of green and beige. It's warm, it's neutral, and it's green. It's essentially a transitional warm gray green, and it's beautiful. Just under a 71 LRV, so that's a pretty solid level of depth for a wall color. Smoky Green is more of a gray, slightly green-toned blue, and it gives you a soothing, cooler take for this color palette. It's one of the few cool colors we're talking about today, but even still, it has some of that green in the background to provide some balance and kind of fit the theme here. Fernwood Green, on the other hand, is pretty warm for a green comparatively, as it brings a pretty strong yellow-gold undertone that is perhaps a tad reminiscent of a color of the year from a few years back called Guildford Green. Although this one has even more of that apparent yellowish green saturation. It's actually a pretty good example of Benjamin Moore being less dependent on those toned down paint colors that are mostly just gray based. Fernwood Green is pretty saturated with color. That brings me to High Park, which is a beautiful kind of dusty emerald green. It's almost like Aegean teal trying to be sage green. Not really a perfect comparison, but they both have comparable LRV numbers, and I would say that High Park is the closest thing to teal in this palette, although it really is just a darker sage green. Gloucester sage is one of the darkest colors here, and it's beautifully described as wrought iron coated with rain-soaked moss. I love it. I think it'd be so fun to work for Benjamin Moore and come up with these descriptions. A dream job. Actually, this is a dream job. It does have that deep gray brown base, but definitely toned with some green as well. And it's that earthy color that would coordinate quite nicely with October Mist as a bit of a 1-2 green contrasty punch. We still have a couple more colors to go, but seriously, more than a third of all these colors in this palette selected by Benjamin Moore are green based, which is crazy to me. I mean, I knew green was in, but not to this extent. Anyway, we also have natural linen as a color, which is just a staple, beautiful, neutral beige, perfect for anyone that wants something even more stable as a color. Maybe they're not ready for green yet, and it just has that versatility factor that you sometimes need in a color. Collector's item is an AF color that is extremely light, with an LRV of 82.22. And even though it's sort of a really light beige, especially when compared to some of the green colors we talked about, it also has a bit of a peachiness to it, or even a slight orange undertone that comes through in a very pleasant manner. A pretty interesting neutral they added to this list is Venetian Portico. And this picks up on the up-and-coming terracotta or clay-based colors that are a natural fit to green. These types of colors don't even need to be represented by paint, because you may already have maybe a weathered brown leather sofa that sort of is reminiscent to this color, or maybe some hardwood flooring. It's a color that can show up in many different forms, not just a wall paint color. This brings us to the second last color in this palette, which is called Steam. And it's also the lightest color we're talking about. Steam is an interesting one because to me, it sort of represents the cloud white of the Affinity color collection by Benjamin Moore. Its LRV is close to 86, which means it's light enough to be used as a white paint color on trims and doors, but it does have a noticeable amount of colorant in it that gives a warm touch to it to help it feel in line with all the other warm colors we spoke about today. It's not gonna feel like custard cream or something. It's not overly yellow or nothing like that. It just has a touch of taupe that really tones things down a bit, keeps it soft, and just keeps it all in line. Also, don't forget, whenever you go with these very slightly warmer off-whites, and you're surrounding them with a bunch of other warmer colors, any yellow tinge you might see in Steam will be way less noticeable, more muted, and it'll just fit a lot nicer. Of all the colors in the 2022 Color Trends palette, I would say Steam is your best choice as a go-to trim color, at least as a bit of a default. Unless, of course, you want to go dark with your trim. And for that, we have the darkest color on this list, which is Mysterious AF 565. This is definitely one of those super dark, kind of off black navy blue colors that has a bit of a denim coloration to it. It has a touch of a purple undertone in certain cases, more so than any strong green or teal feeling undertone. And for that reason, it's not necessarily meant to double down on all of the other greens on this list. It's meant to be an accent or something to stand out on its own a little bit. It's basically serving the same purpose as a black color, although with a little more actual color in it. So that's the entire palette. I think it's appropriate that I do some color code episodes on all these colors, starting with the color of the year, October Mist, coming up on Monday. Which colors are you most looking forward to hearing about? Let me know. Thank you so much for being a subscriber. Your support really keeps this channel moving. Let's see what's up next.